Good morning. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Steve Reed, and I am a pastor at H2O Church in Orlando and a licensed mental health counselor. This is a place where we take bite-sized pieces of mental, emotional, and spiritual health. We seek to grow in our awareness of it, because awareness can give room for movement, and movement can lead to freedom. And it's for freedom that Christ set us free. So we've been in a series about story, and we've taken some time in story to look at some of our own little snapshots. And today we're going to, and we've been looking through the lenses of a number of different people that have given their lives to their own story and helping others engage in theirs. And so we've looked at Dan Allender, we've looked at Dr. Lissa Rankin, we've taken a look at Adam Young, and today we're going to add one more voice to that mix and allow her to invite us down a pathway. And so as we do that, we're going to be inviting Leslie Leyland Fields into Mental Health Monday. And she was at one point speaking to a group of Slavic women through an interpreter, and she was getting a lot of blank faces. She was talking about story and her story and how to engage story, and she wasn't getting anywhere. And so then she shifted and recognized, well, we all have a story, and if you're coming from a spiritual place, your story has something to do with your spirituality. And she said, this is what I told them. I was a nobody searching for God, for something really real and true. And God found me. He left the 99 sheep and came out into the woods, climbed that mountain, and found me and carried me home. I am that 100th sheep, and you are that 100th sheep as well. We were all of us lost, wandering, and God found us. Tell me about that. I say to these women who are now seeing me more clearly, tell me that story. And they couldn't stop writing. Because once we begin to have a foothold in where to start, our story does flow out of us. No matter what place in life we find ourselves, our stories take purchase. They grab a hold and we can let them pour out. She says, writing the truest words we can find from our lives do 6 things. They can order our chaotic present. They can help us make sense of a jumbled past. They can 3, move us from grief to hope. Writing can bring healing to wounds. It can even open the door for reconciliation and forgiveness. And finally, she says, learning to tell a truer story will help us live a better story. In fact, this is the greatest power of story, to illuminate and reveal larger spiritual truths in ways that mere facts can't quite do. In decades past, when our culture subscribed to facts and the knowability of truth, God's word spoke primarily through story. And so she says before she ever jumped into telling her own story, her mind was flooded by all kinds of objections, and maybe yours is flooded by some of those objections too. And so she offers these. My life is just not that interesting. What do I have to write about? I'm unworthy to tell my stories. I'm a nobody, no one will care. I'm scared to look behind me into my past. There are mistakes and failures that I can't face. I just want to move forward. I'm not a real writer. I have no idea how to write a memoir. Can't write the truth. I'd kind of like to stay married. I'd like to stay in my family. My life story, aren't there enough memoirs and life stories out there already? Who needs another one? And maybe some of those excuses, messages run around inside of your head, inside of your heart as you think about engaging in story, and especially in your story. And then she says she came along another writer, Frederick Beckner, who spoke such sense and truth that I began to reconsider my antipathy towards personal writing. And he has a book that he wrote called Telling Secrets, a Memoir. And he said, in that book, he said, my story is important not because it's mine. God knows, but because if I tell it anything like right, the chances are you will recognize that in many ways it's also yours. Maybe nothing is more important that we keep track of, you and I, of these stories of who we are and where we have come from and the people we've met along the way, because it is precisely through these stories in all the particularity, as I have long believed and often said, that God makes himself known to each of us most powerfully and personally. If this is true, it means that to lose track of our stories is to be profoundly impoverished, not only humanly, but also spiritually. Do you see, he says, it matters. It all matters. In the divine economy, none of these moments are wasted. Not the fall of a chickadee from your tree, or the wandering of a rebellious sheep, or the loss of a strand of your hair goes unnoticed by God. And since the one who is running all things, including galaxies, takes notice, he cares to notice lost sheep, dying sparrows, and falling hair, we should notice as well. Writing helps us notice what God notices. So write your story, because God attends to every moment of your life. You should, since he does, you should too. Writing is a form of attention, a form of prayer, he says, a form of listening to God. Even when God feels distant, through writing, through this book, we have a new way to aim our eyes, to tilt our heads to hear. If you could see me here, you'd see me leaning in close and maybe even whispering. Writing the stories from our past enables us to live them again, but this time we live them wiser, better. So we've been taking snapshots. We've been taking snapshots, Polaroid moments of our lives over the past few weeks, and we've noted that some of those Polaroid moments have carried a message about life or a message about me. And we've begun to sort them out into themes. And we've noticed that not every moment is in the same theme. There's some that group together in this theme, and there's some that group together in that theme. And we've even come to recognize that some of those themes compete with each other, that this was going along, and then there's a but then moment, and it moves us into a different understanding of who I am or who we are. And so we've taken the notice of some individual moments, and we've looked at some themes, and we've looked at some plot twists, those but then moments, and we've discovered a turning point. And maybe after that turning point, instead of being carried along by our story, we've been invited into becoming a co-author of our story. And that changes all kinds of things. Now I have a choice. I understand what's happening. Again, it's as I grow in awareness, I have an opportunity to see that there are more paths. And some of those paths can lead my heart towards freedom. And that's what I long for. And now we've begun to step into our role that God, as the author of our story, invites us into. We can become co-authors with him of the path that we're on. And that's where it really gets exciting. Today we want to go back and take a look and think about, like if you think about a Polaroid, you snap the picture and it comes out and it's dark. And then as it's starting to develop, there's this image usually near the center that comes in first, and it's the beginning of the focus, but it's still kind of blurry around it. And then bit by bit, more details get added, more color is added, and that whole image begins to become more and more clear. And so that's some of what we want to do today, is take one or two or three of those Polaroid moments and put some color around it. Think about that developing. What started, and I see a little bit, and now I want to understand a little bit more. So I'm just going to take one of my Polaroid moments, and it in some ways is a silly moment of a silly kid, and yet in other ways it just strikes deeply. And so the reason that this moment that I have shared before, that I called Brussels sprouts, was such a hard moment for me, because there was something deep in me. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to have my mom and dad pleased with me. I wanted to please my parents, not to disappoint them. And there I was, the only one left at the table, with a mostly scraped empty plate and those 6 Brussels sprouts. But I knew the last time I had tried them, that bitter cotton mouth feeling that comes up over me, and I'd only gotten away from the table and escaped because I got to the sink quick enough in the kitchen. I forced them all in my mouth, and I got to the sink in the kitchen quick enough. And I did the thing you can't do in my family. I wasted food. I spit it all into the sink and ran water in it, sinking that soggy, sour sprouts until they were out of sight. But this time, there was too many. I couldn't fit them all in, and I was caught pushing them around on my plate. And then these words, "You know you can't leave the table until they're all gone," which trapped me. I want to be good. I almost threw them up the last time, and there's too many, and it's too late. And so there I was, alone in my shame. My brother and sister weren't any help, not because they didn't care, but what could they do? The gentle, crashing words of my father had already been uttered. My prison bars were tight, I couldn't get out, and I knew it. And I sat there. And after several years at that table, I tried. The first one, it was firm but squishy at that end where the bitterness is the strongest. The next one was squishy all over. I tried just popping it in my mouth and barely chewing it so I wouldn't have to squish all that bitterness out, but I couldn't swallow it. It was too big. So I just kept at it. The last one was on my fork when I knew I'm in trouble. That rising taste of stomach bile told me I was going to lose it, but I still had one left and I'd never make it to the kitchen, and then it happened. It was gross and made me want to throw up, but I had just thrown up. And there I was. I was bad. I had tried my hardest to be good, and I failed. So I must suck. I must not count. And how do you recover from that as a young person? Now, I didn't have a dad who beat me. I didn't go for a week without food. I didn't really suffer. I just got smaller. I just carried with me that moment. I can try my hardest, but I'm no good. And that's where God had to find me, over that stream and up that mountain, and find this smaller me and invite me into a new story where I could begin to see myself the way He sees me. And so it's worth filling out, fleshing out, adding color to some of those moments, because they make a difference in how poignantly they resonate with our hearts, with our minds, and where they've been. So I just want to invite you to pick one or two or three of those Polaroid moments that we spend a little bit of time looking at, and just flesh it out a little bit. Add the context, add the why it had the impact it did. Describe a little bit about the juicy details of what's there, and just notice what comes out. That message followed me, and it got woven into those other times when I was jumped, when I was betrayed by a friend, when other things happened that just confirmed this message. I'm small. I don't matter. I'm not worth it. I'm bad. And God was able to reach into that deep pit where my heart had sunk and bring me out into the light. And so finding these moments and fleshing them out is worth it. Take a few of your Polaroid moments and start filling in some of that color. Thanks for joining us today.